before. As always, we'll start with the reminder that we are recording this and archiving it. We're in webinar mode, so your images and voices will not be captured, but you will be able to communicate by chat. And today, in a little change up for those of you who've been here, we're not going to use the Q&A feature for the following reason. I have a hard stop at 1:55 today because I have to be the logistics person on another of our summer colloquium workshops. So I'll get to as many questions as I can, but those I can't get to, we will save a copy of them from the chat, and I'll follow up in writing any of them that I haven't been able to answer. So good. So yeah, so just a reminder, any communication questions should go into the chat function. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen and go into present mode. So welcome. This is the simplest title by far. The original subheading for this for many years has been networking, in person and online. And as you'll see throughout the presentation, I had to do some editing about what in person means. I'm hopeful that eventually we will all be able to network and do all sorts of other things in person. But in the meantime, I sort of changed some of the language to reflect our current reality and made the distinction between online and then live interaction via Zoom or whatever else. So for those of you who are new, I'm Christine Valenza-Shin. I'm class of '84, and I'm the Senior Associate Director of the Advising and Programs team at Beyond Barnard. And our main mission this summer has been to put on an unprecedented amount of summer programming that we're calling the Summer Colloquium. And some of you have been participating in other sessions or in this session all along. We are at the midway point. We've got 4 weeks left to go, and quite a few things coming up that are open to both students and alumni, notably a couple of graduate school series, specifically for those of you who might be thinking about business school or graduate school in the social sciences, I believe is still coming up. So just to call out a couple of possibilities. Today's mental health image, we're back to the beach. And again, just a simple reminder, I think I do this more for myself than for you all. I hope it doesn't drive all of you crazy. But the idea is just that reminder that looking at nature live, looking at calming images, even on your computer, is helpful as a reminder. I took a lovely video sitting in our brand new Adirondack chairs in our backyard. Doesn't look anything like this beach panorama. But it was about 6 steps too many to figure out how to upload the video. So I'll work on that and hopefully in a future session be able to share the waving trees in my backyard, which is probably the single most relaxing thing that I do on a regular basis. So let's get started. And the computer does not want to turn away from this lovely image and get down to business, but there we go. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about networking in general, some basic principles as I've often been starting these sessions, and then we'll focus on growing your network online, primarily focusing on LinkedIn, but a lot of what we talk about applies to other social media and other outlets as well, and then a little bit about live or in-person networking to finish things up. So networking means a lot of things to a lot of people. It calls up images, some of which create a lot of anxiety. The image of networking back in the 80s of, large groups of people and schmoozing and all of that, which, makes all of us, probably extroverts and introverts, cringe. But, that's definitely given way to other formats, and it was never the only way. A broader, I think, less anxiety-provoking definition is that networking is the building and maintaining of relationships. And this obviously can be both in the personal realm and the professional realm. Of course, we're going to focus more on the professional realm, and of course there can be overlaps. Our friends work sometimes in the same fields, in different fields, as is true of family, and etc. It's an organic, natural process to make connections. You know, some people have small networks, some people have large networks, everything in between, but meeting and building relationships with people and people that you work with or go to school with or otherwise interact with is a natural, organic process. And people have always gotten jobs through networking. It's not something that was invented in, you know, 1982 or 1975 or 1952 or whatever date people might throw out, or whenever there might have first been written a book about how to do this. So it's always existed. It's something that is a natural outgrowth of the people we meet and the people we work with, and people have always used it to get jobs. But as we've noted several times over this summer, we're in a tight job market, a recession of unknown length, and so networking becomes really important. The public-facing part of the job search process is being flooded with people who are out of work and seeking new opportunities, and so the networking part becomes more prominent. The reason we talk about both online, though, and in-person networking is that even though there's been obviously a huge increase in using online tools and using digital methods to connect with people, that good old-fashioned live or in-person contact are still generally more powerful. And these two things work together, as with many other things we've talked about. In this series, there's not they're not completely siloed. They overlap and influence each other. We're going to specifically today, I'm going to use Barnard mostly as a case study. I don't mean to suggest that your Barnard network is your only network, but I think some people underutilize it. And so partly it's to bring to your awareness how strong that network is, how wide and deep that network is. But it also just helps us as a case study. It's a particularly good area to demonstrate. But most of what we talk about, most of the details I'm going to get into can be applied to other connections. And, you know, just gave you a quick list there to think about who else is in your network aside from Barnard folks. But let's talk a little bit about the Barnard connection. So first of all, there's huge numbers of Barnard alumni out there. I'm not always good at remembering the number. Lacey might know offhand how many living alumni we have approximately. The concentration of Barnard alumni has always been in the greater New York City area. There's stats on that. I always feel like it's something like 50% of Barnard alumni live within a 50-mile radius of the city. I might be getting the details on that wrong as well, but there's always been a concentration here in New York. But there are obviously Barnard alumni all over the country, all over the world. And one thing I think I've found both in my work with alumni relations and in Beyond Barnard is the further away you get from New York, the more excited alumni are to hear from students or fellow alumni. So there's that, just sort of that nostalgia, that connection back to New York, back to the campus, back to the school, whatever it means. And it tends to, they don't take it as for granted, perhaps, as some of the people who still live and work so close to Barnard. It is a strong bond, you know, even though people had varying experiences here, sometimes negative, sometimes positive, sometimes mixed. The feelings about the school are strong, and I would say most people are very proud of their degree, proud of the connection, and obviously not everyone's looking to stay in continuous contact with their fellow alumni, but a lot of people are. It's a strong network. And so we encourage you to take advantage of that. There are Barnard women doing almost everything out in the world in various fields and industries and volunteer and community endeavors. And, you know, you can find them and ask to connect. Worst that can happen is they don't answer or say no. Okay, I'm having the usual sticky problem. Okay. And then just a point about the strength of, Barnard as a women's college and as an alumni network focused on women helping women. So that's a strong sort of sense that also can be helpful. And we hear a lot from alumni of all decades that about how they were helped by their, the fellow classmates and professors and staff and alumni. And so many people feel that need to pay back that support and then, continue to support people coming up behind them. So let's talk a little bit about growing your network online. As I mentioned, primarily we're going to focus on LinkedIn. It's still the dominator in the field. I did a little Google search over the weekend when I was working on this, and there are competitors to LinkedIn. A lot of the other social media outlets are mentioned. There's a couple of different outlets specifically for that are more entrepreneurial focused, growing your market, etc. So if you just do the same thing, Google LinkedIn competitors, you can see some of it. But there's when I did that Google search, a lot of articles came up about why does LinkedIn, dominate this particular market. So, yeah, we'll primarily focus on LinkedIn, but again, a lot of what I say can be applied to other platforms. So, sitting at your computer and doing non-live networking is a low-risk activity in the sense that you don't have to get dressed up and go out there and be your public self. You can sit quietly being your private self. But the work you do online can have a really strong payoff, with a both high quality, high number network. The search tools available on LinkedIn and other sites make it just much easier to locate people in your field than in the past. But just making connections, looking at people's profiles, et cetera, is not enough. You do need to take that initiative to follow up with people who are of interest, who you think could be, strong allies in your search or your career shift or whatever else is going on with you professionally. And generally speaking, quality over quantity. My predecessor in this role, she was the person who launched these webinars many years ago. And I remember one of her slides said that you should never connect on anyone on LinkedIn unless you've actually worked with them. So that you can speak to them as a worker and vice versa. But I think that probably went out after the first couple of years of LinkedIn. I think people in general do connect to people they haven't worked with directly and broader, but it's still important to not accept every connection request, not make a bunch of impersonal connection requests, because then you end up with a lot of people, as somebody mentioned last week, in your network that you don't even remember how you connected with them. So, so you want to have hopefully some exchange with someone before you connect to them, but it's up to each person what their criteria is. And I wanted to just give a nod to, networking is not just about finding job leads. There's a lot of aspects to it. So again, thinking a little bit more broadly about the ways you can use LinkedIn and other networking sites. Your own development, even if you're not looking for a job at the moment or even ever, if you're nicely settled in and don't want to change fields or anything, you still want to hopefully be connecting for your professional development. What we've been talking about in this series, your career and job exploration, or at least we talked about that at the beginning of the series. LinkedIn and networking in general can be a really rich source of finding out from other people, what's going on in a field and getting advice. Here we've spent most of the series talking about an active job search. But then there's also a very large entrepreneurial aspect to LinkedIn and social networking sites. And some of you may be in that situation where you're either already in a practice or a business and looking to grow, or you're contemplating that. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a lot of solo practitioners that use LinkedIn in a variety of ways to build their business. And as we talked about last week, there's sort of two sides to LinkedIn. There's find and be found, right? So when we're looking, we are searching for, don't forget the people you already know. You may or may not have connected to them already, but LinkedIn is a good opportunity to circle back to old contacts and then growing new contacts, which we'll talk about more. You can find groups on LinkedIn, companies, and of course with LinkedIn jobs, there's actual job postings. And as we talked about last week, you can be found by the first two bullet points, employers and recruiters. But you also, people in your field may reach out to you for one reason or another, just to grow their network, or they might have an opportunity, or they themselves might be career exploring or job hunting. And then of course, just general, your fellow alumni, other people in your network may reach out to you as well and be looking for you. As I've mentioned from time to time throughout this series, a lot of, the job search is about making things a habit. And so I advocate making LinkedIn a habit, especially if you're in a job search. It's not about actual numbers. It's just about, making a schedule. It doesn't have to be every day. It could be once a week, could be once a month, whatever works for you, but you want to visit the site. You want to have a checklist of tasks that you're doing. You can connect LinkedIn to your email, and there is a LinkedIn app. I'll have to say, when they first launched the app, or when I first became aware of it a couple of years ago, I haven't found it super useful. Your mileage may vary, as they say. And I'm happy to, if people have found it to be a useful app, but it's not my favorite way. I tend to connect to it more. I get LinkedIn updates to my email and then visit the site regularly for all sorts of reasons. So just a couple of words about groups on LinkedIn. These are discussion groups, sort of similar to how Facebook groups have emerged in some ways. And so basically it's a running series of posts. Some obviously are more active than others, and people share all sorts of things. It could be just sharing news, it could be asking questions, it could be sharing jobs and opportunities that are available. And then obviously, as with a lot of other social media, there's room for comments and ongoing dialogue. And in general, when you look at people's profiles, you see that most of them belong to a combination of alumni and professionally based groups. So I think when we looked at my profile last week, and we'll pop over there again soon, you'll see that I belong to a lot of, career advising and higher education related groups, and then also to various alumni, associations, a lot of them Barnard related. And so if you come upon a group, LinkedIn groups, some of them are private and some of them you can just see the profile. Some of them aren't, you actually can't search for. There's sort of different levels. But if you access a group's profile page, take a look. And if, sometimes they're completely open and you can just jump in and start participating. Others that are private groups that have, try and maintain a little bit more of a closed circle, even if it's a very large circle, you have to request to join, and then there generally means there's moderators and they'll take a look. I'm going to mention some Barnard groups in a moment, and generally speaking, it's not, the review isn't terribly vigorous. It's just basically a quick look at your profile to see if there's a Barnard connection. We don't check first to see if we don't check in with the registrar or anything like that. So, okay. Finding groups on LinkedIn, it's a little bit tricky. A lot of it is fed by the algorithms. So if you, we'll hop over to LinkedIn in a few minutes. I'll show you some of this, but this gives you some instructions. So one way is to use the search function, but I was playing around with it, and there does not seem to be an option that I could find. Some of you may know better, where you can just kind of randomly type in a key. You used to be able to type in keywords and different groups would come up. They've either hidden that or taken that away. But when you do click on groups, it will suggest a bunch of groups. And then once you click on those groups, some other additional suggestions come up. So, but you also can search via people's profiles. And so it can be really helpful as you are looking at people's profiles, looking at people within various fields. If you scroll down to the bottom of their profile, I think we took a quick look at this last week, there's an interest section, and then you can click see all, and then what groups they belong to come up, and then you can click through to the group and it will either be open or private, and then you take it from there. So it's another way of sort of finding out, just sitting, in the comfort of your home and sort of exploring what are the sort of groups of interest to various professionals. So just to mention some of the Barnard groups that are on LinkedIn, I think there's multiple groups. The ones that we are, either Alumni Relations or Beyond Barnard or both have a hand in moderating. The largest one is Barnard College Alumni Affiliates, over 6,400 members. I just double checked that. And then there's a number of interest groups that have started over the years. So we started up a Barnard Alumni in Law a couple years ago, as with tech. Barnard Entrepreneurs Network has been around for quite a number of years, and Barnard Women in Entertainment are. So these are for, there may be more, but these are for specific groups that work through either Alumni Relations or Beyond Barnard or both to establish the group and have reach out. And don't forget the fact that, Columbia, you're also part of Columbia University, Seven Sisters, and the Ivy League. And so there, you can sort of search for groups that have those designations as well. All right, so moving away from groups and more to specific people. So once you sign up for LinkedIn or are using LinkedIn more regularly, LinkedIn, as it will with everything else, will suggest contacts based on the fact that you went to Barnard, and also it'll suggest other people as well. So. And that question of to connect or not, and repeating that quality over quantity, you do not have to connect with everyone who sends you a request, nor everyone who pops up, but you want to just take a look at whether this might be somebody you want to talk to further, or somebody you remember well, that you used to work with, and so it's up to you whether to send that reconnection request or accept it, and then follow up from there. So we're going to take a quick look at 3 different ways of finding new Barnard connections. So sort of listed in order of importance. I think the easiest way is in some ways, the easiest or sort of more browsing kind of way, especially, is through going through the Barnard College company page on LinkedIn. And then you can also use the general filters, and then I'll say just a few quick points about Boolean searches, which is a general computer search term, but it does work on LinkedIn. So I'm going to review this quickly and then hop over to LinkedIn and show you what I mean by all of this. So you want to find the Barnard College homepage, and then once you get there, there's a menu on the left where you can, actually I don't think it's See Alumni anymore, I think it just says Alumni. And then it takes you to a Barnard specific filter, and you can click through a total of 5 or 6 categories. And every time you click on a category and make a selection within that category, it could be where they live, where they work, what their field is, what their major was. Then it brings up different people, and you can scroll down and take a look and get a little capsule version, and then you can click through to their profile to get more information. Key thing, and I'll show you this in a minute, is you never want to hit the connection request from the thumbnail, because that just sends an automatic request without allowing you to personalize it. You always want to customize any connection request. And then there's some options at the top of the page that let you do a little bit more focused search. That's where you could type in a specific title or a company, or narrow the class range. And then there's a more general filtering system on LinkedIn. You could simply put in a company name in the main search bar, and then once you're within a company, you can click on possible connections there, alumni connections, or more generally, if you want to bring up this very specific filter, you click inside the search bar and then pick people from the menu and then go from there. This is, I was going to take some of this out because, don't necessarily have to have 3 different ways of finding people, but this feature, I was just going over it with an alumni yesterday, is particularly good if you're trying to find people who used to work at a company, to filter for that, which can be very helpful when you're, when you're in the midst of a job search, or if you're interviewing with a company. It can often be helpful. It's great to be able to talk to people who are currently there, but it's also really interesting to talk to people who used to be at the company. Sometimes there's a little bit more freedom to, give full details. So. And oops, jumped up a little ahead. And then Boolean searches is a general computer search term, and you can use these for a very focused search. This is a lot. You'll see a lot of the examples here are about specific titles. So sometimes, you know, you're looking not so much by field or company, but you are really curious about what a particular title means in different fields. And so this just gives you a bunch of examples of how you can sort of parse that and try and really dig in. So. Good. Okay, so then I want to say a couple, actually, no, this is when we're going to hop over to LinkedIn for a moment. Let me just check on my time factor here. And I want to go to LinkedIn and just show you, break up the blue and yellow text heavy screen and show you some of what I'm talking about. So, so in terms of groups, you click inside the search bar, that brings up a lot of options, and you hit groups. And then here's the sort of LinkedIn generated thing of things I might, some of these I already belong to, some of these I don't, and they're related. And you can see there's quite a few pages of it. So, and then as I say, I'm trying to pick one that I don't think I belong to, just so you can see. So this is an example of one that's completely open. It looks like I can just jump in and start a conversation without having to be a member per se. Whereas, oops, let me go back for a second. Let me think about one that might be. This one might be closed. Nope, that's another open one. So when we're looking at profiles in a little bit, I'll circle back and show you an example. Sometimes when you click on other people's profiles, they belong to different people than you. So yeah, so then I had mentioned that as well. So here is, I'm trying to look for, here's one of our distinguished Barnard alumni. Let's take a look. Oops, where did it go? So if we look at Nalini's profile, okay, here's what I'm talking about in terms of interests. So this is at the very bottom of the profile. And if you click here, see all, and then you can see what group she belongs to. So, so she belongs to BNet. I think that's closed. So let's, I think I belong to that one though. Let's see if I'm specifically clicking on something. No, this is another, oh, there we go. So it's if there's a request to join, it's private. And so then you hit request to join, and then, you know, you'll either get admitted or not. All right, and so then back to searching for individual contacts, which was the other thing we wanted to look at. So here, you can see I searched for Barnard College earlier. For some reason, it's not it used to bring up a list. I'm actually going to go through our esteemed president to get to the company page. What you're looking for is this. You're looking for the Barnard College that comes up in your search term or in somebody's profile that's got the blue seal. And when you click there, it's going to take you to Barnard's homepage on LinkedIn, its company or organizational page. Right? And this is the menu I was talking about. And you click on alumni. And this is the filtering system. So here, up at the top, you've got some very specific. So you could put in the name of a company or a title. Here, you can narrow down the classier if you want. It's usually not, there's sort of a natural filtering that takes place anyway, but sometimes if you want to really hone in on a particular experience level, that can be helpful, all right? And so then you can see what we have is these columns. There's a total of 6, and you're going to access them. You can access the other 4 by hitting the next. So you can start with where they live. So if, for instance, you were thinking, let's leave the country. No, we can't leave the country. If you were thinking about Boston, you can click here. And so now it's going to cut down from over, and then let's say you specifically want to look for somebody at Boston Children's Hospital. And so now we're down to 5. So we've got 5 Barnard alumni living in the Boston area, working for Children's Hospital, and we go down here and you can see the thumbnails. So here's what I was warning you against. If you hit connect when you're in the thumbnail, it's going to send a connection without letting you personalize it. So I'm going to hit that. But if you think you might want to reach out to Melanie, you would look through and we've got some details, etc. And if you say, oh, she would be interesting to talk to, that's an interesting background, then you hit the connection. And you always want to add a note, all right? LinkedIn has stats on this, as it does so many things. You get 300 characters and you write a note, and I'll talk in a few minutes about what you put in that note. It's a very simple formula, okay? So, great, and then I just want to go back to where we were and show you. So let's take that out and take that out and just show you that the other options are what they do. Okay, so that's sort of broadly, you know, how LinkedIn defines various fields. And then what they studied can always be really interesting. We use this a lot with students and recent grads who might be exploring what they could do that's related to their major. Although, of course, here at Beyond Barnard, we make the argument that most majors, you can do almost anything with most majors. But it's always interesting to see where people ended up. That can be a good way. And then what they're skilled at is also a really helpful thing you can add to these. So if you don't see the skill, so if you wanted to look and see grant writing, you can add that skill and see if anybody comes up. So, and then that's a pretty large number of alumni to filter through. So then you might want to go back and add in things like where they live, where they work, etc. So you see how it works. And every time you add a new criteria, right, it narrows down the field and gives you fewer alumni to look at. And it's going to bring up different alumni based on your network. So this is going to be based on sort of who I know. So, so there's people who are first degree connections. That's like being friends on Facebook, and you can communicate openly and directly with them. A lot of the people who may be new to you, or the people that you know but haven't directly connected to on LinkedIn yet, are going to be what's called a second degree connection. And with a second degree connection, you're not allowed to message them directly. You're only allowed to send the connection request. So, and then third degree, actually, I'm curious about this. They keep changing the rules. I think if we click message, yeah, they require you to have premium. So, and you want to focus in general on second degree connections. Those are sort of, you know, it's a little easier to say, hey, we both know this person, or we both used to work at this place. So yeah, so then let me just show you one more thing before we go back to some other points. I want to show you exactly general, but a different way of searching, which is the people, and then you hit all filters. And this gives you a lot of the same thing we just looked at, but this is where past companies, I had mentioned that specifically. All right, so you can either click one of these or you can add one yourself, and that can be helpful. And you can click, you know, a specific school, etc. All right, so that gives you an opportunity to look. And again, we're not necessarily just looking for Barnard people. And it does, if you remember someone's first name, but not their last name or their company, etc. So it gives you some other options. It's another way of doing it. I'm not going to do the Boolean searches in recognition of our time factor, but okay. So, and then, you know, actually while I'm here for time purposes, the next couple of slides we're going to talk about another outlet, which is the Barnard College Alumni Network, which you access through the Barnard Alumni website. So this will be recapped on the screens, but since I'm out of the LinkedIn, let me give you some of this information. If you want to connect with fellow alumni through this format, you go to the Connect menu, you go to Find Alumni, and then you can go to Career Directory. Now, when you click this, it's going to ask me to log in. And if I already have an account on our barnard.edu, if you do not, you activate now. Your name is probably in the database. Well, I think your name would be in the database if you got an email about this series. So if you're a first-time user, you do this. If you're returning, you do this. And if you have any trouble, you email Barnard or call. So I just wanted to give you that preview. I'm not going to go into the in-depth searching. I outline it pretty pretty clearly on the slides, but just to give you an idea, the key thing here, this can be helpful if you don't want to be on LinkedIn, or if you're not finding someone you want on LinkedIn, but I'll say in general, people are more likely to keep their LinkedIn up to date with contact and employment information than they are Barnard. That's not always true. Some people are better about keeping in touch with their college than with an impersonal social media site, but generally speaking, it may not be as up to date. And secondly, the search tools are a little clunkier than they are on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is constantly tweaking and using, so that you might find this a little clunkier, but it still could be helpful in terms of finding people you're interested in, either old people you already know, old friends from college, or from looking for new alumni. Okay, so let's go ahead to this and back to present, keeping an eye on the time. So of course, when you go to rbarnard.edu, it also has events and news and other things as well. But as I showed you, you can hone in on the database. Oops. Sorry, a little jumping ahead. You always get these little, sorry. I don't know why this happens every week. I joke with Lacey when we meet up 10 minutes in advance that it always works perfectly in, great, okay. And then this is a little bit more detail about how to use the filter on that Barnard Alumni Network I just showed you. So you can return to, when you get a copy of the slides, you can return to this list if you're having trouble figuring out. It's fairly self-explanatory, but there's always little quirks. So then regardless of how you find the new contact, right? Again, I'm going to use LinkedIn as the primary example. One of the stumbling blocks, and we get a lot of questions about this, is how do you actually reach out? What's your strategy? What are the particulars? So on LinkedIn, because of the way it's set up that I just showed you, that you can't message people directly unless you're already connected to them. I like to teach it as a two-step process. Some of my colleagues differ and say do it all in the initial request, but I like the two-step process. And so in that 300-character message, you basically just want to, the first thing you want to identify is how you're connected. We both went to Barnard, fellow Barnard grad. We both used to work here. We both know this person, just so they know where you're coming from. And then it's always helpful to mention something you saw in their profile, because that way they know that you actually looked at their profile. And again, it increases your chance of getting a response. And then the concrete ask, and you always want to have, every time you communicate with someone new, you want to have something concrete you're asking for. In this case, it's just to connect. Would love to connect here at LinkedIn. Now, they're not necessarily going to connect you right away. People have different criteria. Some people would prefer to message you first, and then correspond that way, and then eventually might connect you. Other people will connect to you but not say anything, in which case you can go to step 2. Some people will connect to you and send you a message. So, and then of course there's a whole category of people that won't answer. Don't take it personally. Could be busyness. It could be that they're not on LinkedIn very often, don't have it connected to their email. Just focus on the people who do get back to you and following up with them. And then once you're connected, now, whether they've sent you a message or if they've actually directly connected to you, you now can answer that message. And that's where you're going to expand a little bit, tell a little bit more about who you are and what's going on with you. And then the specific thing you want to ask here for is ideally to set up a time to talk if it's somebody you think you'd like to talk to. If you have a very specific piece of advice, you could ask for that, not general advice. Hey, how do I get into tech? You want something much more specific. I've applied to this company and they're asking me this. Do you have any advice on that? So, but what you specifically don't want to do is ask for a job or a job lead. In this step 1 or step 2, you don't want to jump right to that for 2 reasons. One, at any given time, most people don't have a job lead that they can connect you to, but also there's an etiquette to this, and people generally want to have connected to you, possibly had a conversation or some form of communication with you before they get into talking about whether there might be an opportunity that they're aware of. So. Okay. And I just wanted to say a word about high value connections. And I would say these could be people who, they could be sort of people who are very high up in an organization, and that's what makes them high value. They tend to be a little less accessible or less likely to get back to you. But I would say my key definition here is this is that perfect person who is working in your dream job, or is the manager of your dream job, or the head of the organization you've always wanted to work for. And you want to, the key here is you don't want to waste a basic connection requests. They're not necessarily that likely to return it. And so you might, in this case, see if you can connect, you use a common connection to get an actual email or LinkedIn connection. So that's some advice here on this. And then this question of attaching your resume or not. Again, this is one of those areas, wherever I put a question mark in these presentations, it's where you'll hear differing advice from career professionals. I land on the side of don't attach your resume in a first correspondence unless somewhere in that introduction it's been mentioned that you should do that. Because you want to talk to them, you want them to see you as a whole person, first. And so having that live, a phone conversation or a Zoom conversation or an in-person meeting, they're seeing the whole you and not just you as represented on a piece of paper. I feel like the resume gives them an opportunity to say, oh yeah, I can't really help you, or you're not really the right fit here. So I generally I tell people don't attach your resume to an email, an introductory email, unless you've been asked for it. You can always offer it, but don't attach it yet. Okay, so, and then before we leave this section and talk a little bit more about in-person, I just want to mention this Facebook group, Bold, Beautiful Barnard Alumni. Hopefully many of you have joined. It's been around, I feel like it's 2 or 3 years now since it's been up and running. It's not run by the college or Beyond Barnard or Alumni Relations. It was started by Lisa Lynn, class of '98. She's active in the Northern California Club out in San Francisco and environs. She's got several other alumni helping her moderate it. And you can either, the way you get, it's a private group on Facebook, which is one of the reasons it's so good for networking, is that, people go there. It's not just job networking, it's just connecting in general, but there is a lot of job related networking that goes on, and career exploration questions and all sorts of stuff. So it's a powerful source of connecting with other Barnard women. You have to be on Facebook to be able to join it. I get that question from time to time. And you have to be friends with somebody in the group to get invited into the group. So if you're just joining Facebook, or if you're not sure if any of your Barnard friends are in the group, you can directly fill out, there's a Google form that goes straight to the moderators, and they will invite you into the group. It's not instantaneous, they're all busy doing other things rather than just moderating the Facebook group, but they will get to your requests eventually. And I believe Lacey is going to post the link in the chat section as well, so that you can click through that form after. Well, now if you want to save the link, and then afterwards fill it out and become part of that group. And it's one of the nice features is that there are no students they're invited in the fall of their senior year, sort of a rite of passage. So that way it's focused primarily on alumni to alumni networking, but you do, it's a nice thing for the seniors who are beginning to look ahead, to be able to connect as well. All right, so I'm kind of blitzing through this, but I do want to get through, and let's talk a little bit about live or in-person networking. Again, without qualification, I'm going to be hopeful that eventually in-person networking will become possible. I know right now we're sort of in this, mixed period where people are slowly beginning to see, see other people, but not necessarily ready to jump into certainly events and even one-on-ones with people they don't know yet. Just trying to outline some possibility, as I'm sure you're familiar with most of these, but part of what I do in preparing this is sort of generate ideas. And I'll add to this in general. There's sort of been an explosion to events related to your field, but also to sort of themes. So something popped up today. There's going to be a free online conference about women in leadership. And it popped up in my LinkedIn feed, actually. I'm noticing a lot of that since COVID, that sometimes it's media, sometimes it's various professional organizations, and sometimes it's, I don't know what you say, sort of professional interest, not so much limited to a field, but to a concept like women in leadership or diversity, you know, things that cut across fields. So there's been a lot of free or inexpensive opportunities, whether it's conferences or webinars. So definitely, you know, keep an eye out for those things. It can be, you know, a useful opportunity while we're still, you know, functioning mostly online. Yeah, and then Barnard and Columbia, as well as other colleges and organizations, usually have a full calendar, especially during the academic year of events. Again, a lot of this is going to be online for the foreseeable future, but it's worth checking out, you know, various Barnard events, various Columbia events. And then, of course, Barnard has a whole network of regional clubs that do their own events. Again, used to be in person a lot, and now it's probably virtual. And Lacey, my counterpart here on the call from Alumni Relations, part of her main part of her job is managing those regional clubs and events and networks. So keep an eye on that wherever you are. And then we all either belong to or could belong to professional organizations related to our fields, and you know, you tend to hear a lot about the big national conferences, many of which have been online this spring and summer. But there's also a lot of big national professional organizations have regional or mini conferences. They're always eager for volunteers. That can be a really helpful way to sort of get to know people. Of course, you have to do some work in exchange. And in general, you know, they just have meetings. Volunteer work is a good source of networking in the sense of, you know, people see you in action, and you tend to meet people from, you know, sort of different walks of life, which can help expand your network in helpful ways. And then I decided to keep this last point in, even though we're only slowly going back to our dentists and hairdressers, and hopefully not too much to our bartenders, since that seems to be on the top of every list I've seen of most dangerous activities. But the concept is that your networking is not just your profession. There are friendly, chatty people that we all come encounter with, and you never know, if you mention to your hairdresser that you're looking for a job, you never know who else she might see or he might see the next day or the next week. So just keeping that in mind. All right, I'm gonna go through the rest of this. I have to stop in about 6 minutes, so. Great. Okay, just some tips. I like that second one. I learned that at a conference a few years back. One of the speakers on one of the panels said that she had already connected digitally to people who'd taken that, whatever the hashtag was, and were live tweeting. And so to her point, she was a recruiter. She said that shows a certain amount of initiative and tech savvy. So I thought that was an interesting one. Again, this is going to be tricky in this whole world of online conferences and meetings and events, but adapt accordingly. And the fourth bullet's for you introverts. It's one of the you know, introverts don't love to be in large groups necessarily, but are more comfortable if they have a specific role. So that's something that you can take a look at. Do people, business cards are fading. I'm going to assume that they are going to be even less popular in a post-COVID world, but there are alternatives. But the idea is to, you know, if you have a good conversation with somebody, get their contact information. And then you can follow up either by email or by connecting on LinkedIn. And in that follow-up, you could ask for, again, something specific. I think the idea is if you're going to go to these events, big or small, live or, you know, in person or live on digital, to, you know, make those connections. Okay. Few points about informational interviews. Talk a lot about asking for the informational interviews. My basic formula, because a lot of people say, what do I do with this? Basic formula is get them talking first. Get some people like to talk about themselves, even shy people, and it gives you a broader sense of where they're coming from, and which then allows you, when you transition to you and your plans, it allows you to tailor that a little bit more. So, and then just in terms of closing things out, if someone connects you, you know, always say yes. If they don't offer to make further connections, you can ask if you would like. So couple little tips there. And then just some reminders that, you know, the follow-up is key. It's great to have these conversations. It's great to make these connections, but in order to sort of parlay it into an ongoing connection, ongoing relationship, not that you're going to be talking every week or anything, but the quick thank you and the quick request on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And then it's always great to circle back and let people know once a change has been made. If they, you know, even if you had a conversation with them very early on that didn't necessarily have a direct route to your new job or your new career, it's just a way of positively reinforcing networking, which keeps everybody, you know, hopefully being good networkers and good supportive people. So let people know even if it's been a while. Okay, we're going to race to the end. And it looks like I'm going to be answering questions in writing, so please feel free to share them in the chat. So great. And then maintaining relationships. That occasionally is really important. You do not want to bombard people with constant updates, but we're talking, you know, once a year, a couple times a year, or even just when something happens, you know, you change jobs or something of note happens. But you also can, again, the key here is, you know, with people that you've had one conversation with or you've just connected with on LinkedIn, you don't want to overwhelm them. You know, so, but posting regularly, when you post on LinkedIn, when you participate in groups, there, you know, different people you've connected to are going to see that, and that can keep you sort of front of mind, right? And my little caution on the next bullet is just sometimes promotions pop up like months after somebody's just kind of hopped on LinkedIn and updated their profile. So just be careful. Don't assume that something's happened right, you know, recently. It might be. So it's usually worth clicking through their profile and seeing how long ago they got that promotion or new job, right? And then in turn, we've talked a little bit about the give and take here. You want to always be ready to, you know, help out when people get in touch with you. Okay. All right. So we blitzed through this relatively quickly. I apologize that it was mostly a one-way communication today, not a lot of chance for you to chime in, but I will take a look. And just want to let you know, so we've got 3 more sessions, and next week I'm going to take a break as your primary facilitator and turn things over to my esteemed colleague, Alexa Hamill, also an alum, and she's going to facilitate the presentation and discussion on interviewing. And then I'll be back for the last 2 sessions to talk about negotiating the job offer and then managing your ongoing professional development once you've made that, gotten into that new job or new switch. Or if you have decided at the end of all this that you're not going to move on for now, but you still want to be growing and building your professional portfolio. As always, you can make an advising appointment now or later. And if you have any trouble with that, you can email Beyond Barnard or myself directly. There's my email. In terms of appointments, always easier to shunt it to Beyond Barnard. They get back to you faster than I do, and they can set you up with me. All right, again, apologies for sort of how much talking I've done and how fast I went through this, and that I can't screen questions live this week, but I will, not Lindsay, that's another colleague of mine, Lacey will share your questions with me, and I will figure out a way to efficiently answer them in writing and get that to you. So thank you very much for your participation. Hope to see you again next week or in the following weeks, and everybody take good care and have an awesome week.